Yes, yes. Come to the office. That's what I said. No. Good behaviour. Tea's getting cold. You alright, mate? Yeah, alright. But that's what I said. I wouldn't do it. No, no, God, no. Not for all the tea in China. Huh. Not for all the tea in China. Odd phrase. I wonder where that's from. Sounds like that would be quite a valuable thing, assuming you can convert it all into cash. Turns out the first use of all the tea in China was in 1817 in a book called Rob Roy by Walter Scott. Apparently it was a popular phrase in Australia and likely originated there. The average 1800s Australian being very up on their international trade statistics apparently. It doesn't take a lot to find the value of all the tea produced in China now, or at least as of 2023. It is, after all, the most economically monitored state in the world. Thank you, Mao. China exports about £1.39 billion worth of tea a year and produces about 6.6 billion kilograms, or £13.2 billion. Now that's a lot of money. That would make you the 175th richest person in the world, the equivalent of an owner of a Californian-based venture capital company. If I'm honest, it would have to be a really major statement for me to reply, no way mate, not for all the tea in China. That is assuming I'd be able to instantly liquidate all that tea in China into numbers on my banking app, and not that I'd open my front door to 6.6 billion kilograms of tea on the doorstep. Or more accurately, opening my front door to see the entirety of my local postcode converted to tea. Imagine the Hoover Dam, yeah, that Hoover Dam, but made out of tea, being instantly transported onto your street. I wouldn't like that. But what about in 1817? How much would all the tea in China have been worth then? Turns out no one really cared about collecting clear, accurate and complete macroeconomic data before like the 1920s, and especially not in a region that most saw as backwards, mysterious and ripe for exploitation at the time. Still, in the end I worked out a method that would at the very least produce a result. I've decided not to mind the fact that with the various generalizations and assumptions, I might not get anything that represents real history. I just went ahead and got a result. And I'm going to call it the right result. Who's going to know? Well, I suppose you and I would know. Whatever. Whenever I do this sort of bad maths, I'll flash up this picture of a shark just so we can keep some sort of air of transparency. Also, China didn't exist in the 1800s. At least not in the same way. So we'll be comparing the modern region of China to roughly the same landmass that was at the time, mostly the Qin dynasty. There are, however, some records from merchants, especially the East India Trading Company, about how much tea they extracted out of this region in 1817. Ideally, we'd use the sales price of that tea, which is a bugger to find, by the way, because there was seemingly no standard unit of measure at the time. How much does a packet weigh? How much tea does a case hold? What about a chest? What about a bale of tea? God knows. Like, fuck for the metric system. Anyway, we'd use the sales price of tea, take off the cost of shipping, cost of transport and duties to find the FOB price, and then calculate a domestic ex-works price for all the tea in the domestic market of China. This would give us a value, or price, of tea in the region, which we could times by the quantity produced of tea to give an overall value for all the tea in China in 1817. But not all the tea in China is the same. There are 6 main varieties of tea: green, white, yellow, red, oolong, and dark tea, but over 1,500 different cultivars as of 2023. Each of the tea varieties have similar but different prices. This means we would need to do the above for each of the different varieties. Doing this in the modern day would take the collective efforts of a team of people the best part of a year to work out. Doing this for 1817 seems impossible from what I've seen, even if you assume that they only grew the 6 main varieties at the time. So, some rules of thumb are going to be needed here. Let's pull out some ratios and major assumptions. As mentioned, the only solid data I could get from back then was the total exports of the East India Company from the region. With a lot of work, I found a quote for the same year that put tea at £18 per kilogram when sold in London. That's in 2019 prices. Just to say, I'm going to give all prices from now on in pounds in 2019, because otherwise it's quite hard to appreciate just how valuable tea was back then. There is an issue in using the sales price, in that we don't know the markup, etc. But as I said earlier, it turned out to be impossible to work out an ex-works price for over 200 years ago. Go figure. So the value of tea per kilogram was £18.04, and the total value of China's exports at the time was 221.4 million. Now that's a lot of money, but that's only supposedly the exported value. What about all the tea in China? To work this out, we need to construct a value. This can be done using China's ratio of exports to total production. In 2023, this ratio was about 21%. Using this ratio for the 1817 export value, we can construct a value for all the tea in China. This stands at just over £1 billion in today's money. To put this in perspective, this was more than the King of England, George III, who boasted a wealth of 300 million in today's money. Now that's a lot of money. You would have been the richest person in the world, and without electronic banking, you need a fuck-off big safe. What would I do for all that money? Well, it's not actually a nice thing to think about using specific examples, but we could make a graph. If we assume a positive relationship between price and immorality, so you do morally worse things for more money. This for me, and I hope for most, wouldn't be a linear relationship. It would take exponentially more money for me to harm someone physically than to steal something from like Tesco's. And the worse an action gets, the more someone would need to pay me to do it. This gives us an exponential graph. Oh, that looks familiar? Probably a coincidence. To conclude, what a stupid phrase, especially one to use in the office. You or I would do a lot for all the tea in China, or the monetary value, either then or now. So unless you're refusing to commit mass murder or a war crime or something, hold off on making such stupid statements. The person I heard at work using this phrase was only refusing to edit some minutes.